if one thinks of China and critical mineral trade, and for that matter, all natural resources, the one word that comes to mind is dominance, dominance, and dominance. China is not only rich in mineral resources, some of them in the critical mineral space, but China also dominates for two other reasons. One, China has a huge internal market, both at the industrial and consumer ends. China also has the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. What this means is combining natural resource wealth with significant financial resources and internal market. China occupies a unique place that probably historically has never been occupied by a single sovereign rather than a colonial power. The question then becomes, what does this mean for the geopolitics of critical minerals? And a good way to respond to that question is by looking at what China is doing. First, China is leveraging its capacity to manufacture to dominate in the supply of component parts necessary for e-vehicles, necessary for transition to clean energy technology, but also necessary for our electronic gadgets. China is also using its huge state-owned entities to conduct government-to-business transactions and government-to-government transactions at will and to its advantage. China's combination of diplomacy, trade, and its market strength is redefining the power structure between itself, industrialized countries, and emerging market countries. But either way, on the supply or demand end, China maintains a significant dominance. So how is China using this to help itself? Let's look first at what China does in emerging market countries. Here, China's focus, whether it is dominating the mining of copper and cobalt out of the DRC, China intends to also dominate the procurement of critical minerals to its own gain. China also is going into emerging markets to acquire new discoveries, as was the case in Zimbabwe's lithium deposit. And so China, in that sense, is no different from Europe and the United States in that China's attitude towards emerging market countries is that they are a source of supply for its insatiable industrial appetite. And the notion that somehow China differs from Europe or the United States, frankly, is a fallacy. So here's one proof, if you doubt. Proof that China is all about China is exemplified in a law that was passed towards the end of 2024, wherein China barred any Chinese entrepreneur, any Chinese state-owned entity, or any Chinese entity for that matter, to export any rare earth-related technology, whether it is used for discoveries, for mining, or for processing. The point being, China not only wants to dominate the supply of raw material, China means to use its technological know-how to deny others access, including those very countries like Zimbabwe. A Chinese company is mining lithium, from actually processing the lithium in Zimbabwe. The idea that merely producing a concentrate is processing is flawed in the extreme. Here is something else we'll see about China in relation to access to critical minerals. There are very few Chinese companies today that undertake exploration outside China. Instead, the trend that we are seeing is that China waits for discoveries to be made by others and then uses its financial muscle to acquire the assets from either the governments or junior companies that don't have the financial wherewithal to take them to production. What that tells you is that China is risk averse. China will let others undertake exploration, incur the cost and the risk of no discovery. But in the event of a discovery, guess what? China will come and acquire a very, very weak value proposition that should, together with barring technology export, be a wake-up call for anybody who thinks China is anything except for and about China. But China has a very strong value proposition, not just for emerging market countries, actually for established industrialized economies, because China is the world's largest destination for processing and refining metals. But it's not just that China has one, security of energy of supply and scale and efficient engineering processes. It's actually that China is extremely cost competitive. The result of which is this, that countries like Australia have come to tell you the fact that their mining companies, BHP, Rio Tinto, and others, will generate more tax for them at home by exporting the ore to China, where it will be so efficiently processed. Those companies become significantly more profitable than they would otherwise be were they processing in their home countries. This is a strong value proposition that on face value may not seem so. On the manufacturing side, China also offers countries like the United States and European countries a very strong value proposition, again, for efficient production of electronic goods, such that companies like Apple, Microsoft, and for that matter, Tesla, looking for component parts for their e-vehicles, find it more cost competitive to have those component parts, all those gadgets produced in China and then shipped home. It is estimated that under the current market, an average iPhone costs $1,500, but that if the United States were to bar Apple from producing it in China, it would cost the average American consumer $3,500. China becomes a game changer in this way, that it has advantage of both supply, processing, manufacturing, and then distribution. Does that mean China is unbeatable? Who knows? My guess would be no. And if you doubt, remember what the British used to say, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, some argue now it doesn't even rise. The question becomes, how do emerging market countries potentially partner with Europe and the United States to create a groundswell such that while China dominates, China does not nevertheless abuse its position of advantage This is yet to be a issue for debate, much less one that is taken seriously, because the different blocks are themselves busy competing. In the interim, there's no doubt that China will be the king and queen of critical mineral industry-driven technologies and economies.